Ooh, an actual TED Talk. Oh boy, I wonder which area we'll be focusing on today. Technology, entertainment, or design? Let's find out.
We often hear these days that the immigration system is broken.
Yes, we often do. I have actually witnessed, on the sidelines at least, the Byzantine labyrinth of that system when seeing how a coworker of mine had to jump through many convoluted hoops just to follow all of the rules to come to this country legally. So, yes, we hear about it, and I think there is some truth to the claim. So, are we going to be talking about how technology, entertainment, or design will help to streamline the immigration system?
I want to make the case today that our immigration conversation is broken, and to suggest some ways that together we might build a better one.
The conversation is broken. Okay. So, are we going to build a better conversation with technology, entertainment, or design?
In order to do that, I'm going to propose some new questions about immigration, the United States, and the world. Questions that might move the borders of the immigration debate. I'm not going to begin with the feverish argument that we're currently having.
Oh, well, thank goodness we're not going to have that argument.
Even as the lives and well-being of immigrants are being put at risk at the US border and far beyond it.
Oh, so you're not going to go into that argument. You're just going to passively and aggressively make the argument under your rhetorical breath. Got it.
Instead, I'm going to begin with me in graduate school in New Jersey in the mid-1990s, earnestly studying US history, which is what I currently teach as a professor at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, you're a university professor of US history. So you should really know your stuff then. I always love hearing from an expert.
And when I wasn't studying, sometimes to avoid writing my dissertation, my friends and I would go into town to hand out neon-colored flyers protesting legislation that was threatening to take away immigrants' rights. Our flyers were sincere, they were well-meaning, they were factually accurate, but I realize now they were also kind of a problem.
Would you say they were problematic?
Here's what they said. Don't take away immigrant rights to public education, to medical services, to the social safety net. They work hard. They pay taxes. They're law-abiding.
Okay, let's back up slightly. When our speaker is talking about immigrants here, he is conflating two very different categories of actors: legal immigrants and illegal immigrants. These are two diametrically opposed types of behavior for someone coming into this country. And the immigrants he is, and I assume for the majority of this talk will be, talking about are in the country illegally. So right from the start, a declaration that the immigrants he is talking about are law-abiding is a false statement on its face.
They use social services less than Americans do.
Well, I am glad that you at least distinguish illegal immigrants as not Americans. But whether they use social services less than citizens or not, they are doing so while being here illegally, which means whatever they are taking advantage of is thus not going to law-abiding residents and citizens.
They're eager to learn English, and their children serve in the US military all over the world.
None of that absolves them of their crimes.
Now, these are, of course, arguments that we hear every day. Immigrants and their advocates.
Correction. illegal immigrants and their advocates.
Use them as they confront those who would deny immigrants their rights or even exclude them from society.
Illegal immigrants have limited rights in our Constitution, and being welcomed into a society means adhering to that society's laws, which illegal immigrants are inherently not doing.
And up to a certain point, it makes perfect sense that these would be the kinds of claims that immigrants' defenders would turn to. But in the long term, and maybe even in the short term, I think these arguments can be counterproductive. Why?
Why? Because none of those arguments, which, by the way, are not so much arguments as they are non sequiturs, none of them change the fact that illegal immigrants broke the law in coming here and are thus criminals. And such is as well a slap in the face to everyone who has ever come to this country legally and who have followed the rules to live here. That is why.
Because it's always an uphill battle to defend yourself on your opponent's terrain.
What? Opponent's terrain? You mean the terrain of the United States? Well, yeah, it is hard to defend yourself when you are intentionally trespassing on someone else's property. Go figure.
And unwittingly, the handouts that my friends and I were handing out and the versions of these arguments that we hear today were actually playing the anti-immigrants game.
Anti-illegal immigrant, not anti-immigrant. I swear, every time he uses the term immigrant without qualification, the more nonsensical everything he says becomes.
We were playing that game in part by envisioning that immigrants were outsiders, rather than, as I'm hoping to suggest in a few minutes, people that are already, in important ways, on the inside.
Immigrants are outsiders. That's what makes them immigrants. They were coming here from somewhere else. And I think this is the first time that our speaker has said immigrants in the correct context. Kudos to him.
It's those who are hostile to immigrants, the nativists, who have succeeded in framing the immigration debate around three main questions.
Hostile against immigrants or hostile against illegal immigration?
First, there's the question of whether immigrants can be useful tools. How can we use immigrants? Will they make us richer and stronger?
Useful tools. So, anyone opposed to illegal immigration sees illegal immigrants not as human, but as tools. Got it.
The nativist answer to this question is no, immigrants have little or nothing to offer.
So wait a second. The nativists do not see illegal immigrants as useful tools. They do not see illegal immigrants as having anything to offer. So does that mean that the non-nativist illegal immigrant advocates do see illegal immigrants as useful tools? I think I'm getting some mixed messages here.
The second question is whether immigrants are others. Can immigrants become more like us? Are they capable of becoming more like us, capable of assimilating? Are they willing to assimilate?
Willing to assimilate. Well, in order to become a legal citizen of the United States, you must be able to demonstrate, amongst other things, that you are able to read, write, and speak basic English, have a basic understanding of U.S. history and government, which, as a professor of U.S. history, I am sure you must appreciate, be a person of good moral character, and demonstrate an attachment to the principles and ideals of the U.S. Constitution. So, it's not a matter of whether someone from the outside is willing to assimilate, so much as that they are required to show a dedication towards assimilating before becoming a legal citizen of the United States. By coming to this country illegally, by entering and residing here in violation of federal law, dodging all the rules and prerequisites to be here legitimately, illegal immigrants have already demonstrated a low moral character and are thus detached from the principles and ideals of the U.S. Constitution. It's not a matter of them not being willing to assimilate, it is that they do not care to assimilate.
Here again, the nativist answer is no. Immigrants are permanently different from us and inferior to us.
Illegal immigrants are criminals by the very nature of their choices and actions. In various degrees, criminals in our society, both legal resident or not, are inferior in that they ignore the laws of our society as well as demonstrating a disrespect for the rights of others. But once again, our speaker is happy to conflate law-abiding legal residents or naturalized citizens with trespassing criminals.
And the third question is whether immigrants are parasites.
Not simply immigrants. Illegal immigrants. Now, as far as parasites, well, you tell me. If someone breaks into your home and sleeps on your couch, eats your food, uses supplies from your medicine cabinet, all the while not paying you any rent, and they hide every time you try to get them to leave, what words would you use to describe such a person? Or are you just going for the scornful angle of anyone who thinks this way sees immigrants as a kind of disease and less than human? Is that what you're going for? I can only wonder.
Are they dangerous to us, and will they drain our resources?
Dangerous? Well, I don't know. Are illegal immigrants being screened for any criminal backgrounds prior to entering our country? Have any illegal immigrants ever committed additional crimes or harmed anyone after entering the country illegally? I mean, is there any danger in letting a complete stranger into your house without question? You tell me.
Here, the nativist answer is yes and yes. Immigrants pose a threat, and they sap our wealth.
Illegal immigrants are an unknown. They can either be a threat or they may inadvertently contribute to threats, given that their situation discourages them from reporting any crimes they witness or any crimes they fall victim to, allowing bad actors to continue acting badly. So, yes, they are both an inherent threat and an inherent drain on resources that they are not necessarily entitled to by being here illegally.
I would suggest that these three questions and the nativist animus behind them have succeeded in framing the larger contours of the immigration debate. These questions are anti-immigrant and nativist at their core, built around a kind of hierarchical division of insiders and outsiders, us and them, in which only we matter and they don't.
Us versus them. That notion was at the heart of our speaker's argument here, that the immigrants were the them, and the nativists, which, if you'll forgive my making an assumption, sounds more like a polite euphemism for racists or white nationalists, the way our speaker frames the term, that the nativists were the us, and that this divide between the immigrants and the nativists was what was causing the broken conversation about immigration. Except the actual fracture in the discussion, the one that I constantly have read in our media and heard from our politicians, is the same semantic alchemy that our speaker is practicing here. I would suggest that by rhetorically combining two distinctly different demographics and turning them into a single, wholly victimized population, our speaker is perpetuating the us versus them narrative, where the us is the highly moral people who are the virtuous defenders of the downtrodden immigrant, and the them are the nativist xenophobes who see anyone on the outside as subhuman parasites. Except things are not that cut and dry, and our speaker knows it. Because by conflating law-abiding residents with criminal trespassers, and wrapping both within a term that carries legitimate sentiment within a country that prides itself on being a melting pot, our speaker is as well conflating rational advocates of law and order with the worst kinds of isolationist ideologies. He is effectively calling me a villain because I think people should follow our laws, regardless of whether they are a resident or a visitor. And I have heard this sort of blindly binary thinking before.
Either you are with us, or you are with
the nativists.
And so, in the absence of considering any moderate stance on the issues, in the absence of conceding to the nuances between the several arguments and concerns about the crisis at the southern border, all our speaker is doing is to be as divisive an instrument as the very border wall he would lament. Because by making this debate one of good versus evil, our speaker is not leading a moral crusade, but is rather spearheading an entirely dogmatic inquisition. Postscript. As you may have noticed, I only covered about 5 minutes of the complete TED Talk. This is because our speaker has probably been one of the most deceptive and infuriating presenters I have ever listened to. At no point in his 16-minute presentation does he ever use the word illegal, or any synonym of same, to distinguish law-abiding citizens and criminal trespassers. The closest he ever comes is to describe how shady employers are willing to hold an immigrant's lack of papers over their heads in order to exploit them. That is it. You cannot have a healthy conversation if you are unwilling to acknowledge reality, unwilling to accept that any shade of disagreement does not then make someone part of a wholly evil temperament. And yet, our speaker is teaching history to impressionable students through this very lens. A lens where dissent is discrimination, and criminality is a noble struggle. That is not a conversation. That is dogma. As always, thank you for watching.